The Sanxingdui are a strange offshoot of early Chinese civilization. Their remains were unearthed in the 1980s when construction workers accidentally uncovered a massive collection of artifacts, mostly made of bronze, plastered with gold. Sanxingdui means three-star mounds. It was given that name by a local legend, saying that the three major mounds of the site were created when God dropped a few handfuls of earth onto the land. Sanxingdui is located in Chengdu, the capital of the Sichuan province. The area is also mentioned by Emperor Jia Qing of the 19th century Qing dynasty, who says of the place in his Hangzhou Annals that there is a land of mystery in the southwest where three star-shaped clay piles shine with the moonlight. The three clay piles are said to have once been star-shaped walls that withered away into the mounds that exist there today. In total, there have been somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 artifacts, some in pieces and some intact, found at that site. Some of the relics are carbon dated to about the 12th century BC. Mysteriously, no writings or human remains have been found at the site. Scholars have found some relics that could show that these strange people reflected in their artwork were the legendary ancient Shu people. The ancient Shu, not to be confused with the later Common Era Shu, were contemporaneous with the Shang dynasty. The earliest known written records from historical China date from as early as 1250 BC from the Shang dynasty. This would place the supposed Sanxingdui people right at the onset of Chinese civilization. This might account for their almost foreign-like artwork. One of the sculptures, with the head of a human and the body of a snake, were characteristic of ancient Shu civilization. The Shu peoples were first mentioned in inscriptions written by the Shang dynasty. Prior to the discovery at Sanxingdui, the Shu remained mythical but could now be revived through the artifacts of the strange peoples that left them behind. Unfortunately, we do not know much about the Shu or the Sanxingdui because of the lack of written records or human remains. All we know is that they abruptly vanished around 1200 BC. Scholars have assumed over the years that they most likely disappeared due to natural disasters. Diverting from the Sanxingdui for a moment, we can examine a strange claim by some scholars and theologians about China's earliest religious beliefs. There is an almost 500-year-old altar in Beijing, China, residing in the Temple of Heaven. Every year, the emperor would sacrifice a bull there in a ritual known as the border sacrifice. This ceremony ceased in 1911. However, the ceremony itself goes back 4,000 years. One of the oldest records of the ceremony is found in a book written by Confucius known as the Book of History. In it, he details that Emperor Shun, 2256 BC to 2205 BC, sacrificed to Shangdi. Shangdi translates to heavenly ruler. The strange claim here is that the early Chinese were practicing a form of worship towards God, adopted by their Mesopotamian ancestors. Some theologians believe that in this ceremony of the sacrificial bull lies a deep history of tradition linking the Chinese to early Israelite expansion. Recitations of the border sacrifice recorded on statues of the Ming Dynasty, 1368 Common Era, gives us a clear idea as to who this Shangdi was. The recitation is as follows. To thee, O mysteriously working Maker, I look up in thought. With the great ceremonies I reverently honor thee. Far distant here, I look up to thy heavenly palace. Come in thy precious chariot to the altar. Thy servant I bow my head to the earth reverently, expecting thine abundant grace. Oh, that thou wouldest vouchsafe to accept our offerings and regard us while thus we worship thee, whose goodness is inexhaustible. This prayer has a semblance of Mesopotamian sentiments towards their gods and the later Jewish god, Yahweh. It is interesting that the god Shangdi is mentioned as having a chariot in the above passage. In the Bible, we at times find Yahweh visiting his prophets in a flying chariot, as he did with Elijah. In another passage, a part of these inscriptions, we find a shockingly similar recitation to that of the Old Testament, as is follows. Of old in the beginning, there was the great chaos, without form and dark. The five elements had not begun to revolve, nor the sun and moon to shine. You, O spiritual sovereign, first divided the grosser parts from the purer. You made heaven, you made earth, you made man. All things with their reproducing power got their being. Of course, the imagery of the darkness and chaos of the beginning of the universe is reminiscent of the Mesopotamian viewpoint as is reflected in the Bible in Genesis, as is stated, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And God said, Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas." This imagery is also found in the older Sumerian version predating the Old Testament, as is follows. When the heavens above did not exist, and earth beneath had not come into being, there was Apsu, the first in order, their begetter, and demiurge, Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. They had mingled their waters together. The gods were created within them. There is an obvious connection in belief as is expressed in all three cosmologies. In early Chinese culture, Shangdi as a name was interchangeable with Tian or heaven, as is attested by early Han Dynasty scholar Zhang Xuan, who was among the first to be quoted corroborating the connection. Interestingly, Tian meaning heaven is phonetically similar to An, the Sumerian head of the gods. An also means heaven. Within the border sacrifice recitations, we find another passage with strikingly similar sentiments as those found in the Bible. In the passage, it is said that when Shangdi, the Lord, had so decreed, he called into existence heaven, earth, and man. This statement mirrors the words in Psalm 33, "By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth." Even stranger is that some specific words in Chinese script bear what some claim to be encoded messages relating to the Bible or Mesopotamian mythology. Some theologians believe that, as the Bible states, in the Tower of Babel incident, mankind used to speak one language but were stripped of that privilege. After we were condemned in the Tower of Babel event, mankind was scattered and separated by language. However, there are similarities in many of these languages around the world, with roots leading back to similar tongues and meanings. The Chinese symbol for garden comprises of 4 total individual symbols making up the whole word for garden. The 4 symbols are dust, breath, 2 persons, and enclosure. Theologians see this as an obvious encoding of the Garden of Eden story, where man is made from dust, the breath of God, given a partner, and placed into an enclosure or garden. Even more mysterious, the word boat comprises of the individual symbols for vessel, 8, and people. Interestingly, Noah was saved from the great flood in a vessel or boat-like structure with a total of 8 people: Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and 3 wives. Could the early Chinese be an offshoot of some Mesopotamian branch of people, or learn their customs from a branch of these people? This is all conjecture here, but it is intriguing. Going back to the Sanxingdui, it is interesting that they existed in a primal time period in China's history with strange artifacts that also hold some resemblance to Mesopotamian art. Among the many artifacts found is a solar-like wheel. The sun disk or solar wheel is of course found in all cultures. However, this particular one is unique and finds no other real counterpart in the rest of China's history. It also bears a resemblance to the Egyptian symbol of the duat. The duat was viewed as the realm of the dead, or an etherical realm of the spirit. The style of bronze making by the Sanxingdui is said by scholars to also be unique to them and not of the same style as their Chinese contemporaries. We can see similarities in their fading green statuettes in those of the Canaanites, who also forged idols in a similar manner. Some of their less exaggerated characters share a similar facial structure with almond-shaped eyes. Above all is the similarity of the Sanxingdui priestly or godly figurines with that of the high god of the Canaanites, Baal or Baal. Could the Sanxingdui be an offshoot of some ancient Mesopotamian culture that was washed away in the Great Flood of old? Or were they a part of a global culture that shared similar beliefs? Were they on the run from something, simply finding their place on the Shangdi plains to build their star forts? Where are they now? We may never know.